I never thought I'd find myself in this position. My name is Jake, and I used to think my life was pretty good. At 35, I had a stable job as a marketing manager, a nice house in a decent neighborhood, and a wife who I genuinely loved. Her name is Lisa. We had been married for nearly 10 years, and I always saw us as a team. We supported each other. We had this great little rhythm going. That rhythm was shattered when I discovered she was having an affair with our life coach. It all started about a year ago when Lisa insisted we hire a life coach to help us with our so-called goals. I didn't think we needed it, but Lisa was adamant, and after some back and forth, I agreed. Enter Mike, the life coach. Tall, fit, and charming, with that type of magnetic personality that can make anyone feel at ease. I didn't think much of him at first, but I did notice a shift in Lisa's demeanor once they started their sessions. She would come home glowing, talking animatedly about her breakthroughs while I'd be sitting there, trying to muster up interest in her newfound passion for self-discovery. I thought it was great that she was so motivated, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The first sign of trouble came during a dinner party we hosted. Lisa was unusually distant, glued to her phone and buzzing with excitement whenever Mike texted. I brushed it off as work-related stress, but I couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy. Later that week, I caught her sneaking off for extra sessions with Mike. She said they were diving deeper into topics, and I believed her. After all, who wouldn't want to improve themselves? Then one Friday night, I returned home a little earlier than expected. I was looking forward to a relaxing evening with my wife, maybe binge-watching our favorite show. But when I walked in, I found her in our bedroom, phone in hand, the sound of muffled laughter coming from the speakers. My heart dropped. I remember standing there, frozen, listening to the laughter and the way she was talking. It was flirty, intimate, different from how she usually spoke to me. I've never considered myself a jealous person, but that moment ignited something in me. I did confront her right away. I wanted to gather proof. I wanted to know if my gut feeling was right. Over the next few weeks, I paid close attention to her behavior. She was always busy, often coming home late with excuses that felt rehearsed. She would claim work obligations or late workout sessions. Something inside me began to churn with anger and sadness, but I put those feelings on the back burner, convincing myself I needed to be rational about this. Then one afternoon, I found an open email on her laptop. I know it was an invasion of privacy, but I had to know. The moment I read the words, "I can't wait until we can be together without hiding," I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I closed the laptop slowly, my heart racing, and the reality of her betrayal sank in. I felt like I was in a bad movie, the kind where the protagonist suffers, and you're just waiting for the inevitable confrontation. That night, I confronted her. I didn't scream, I didn't throw things. I just asked her directly, "Are you sleeping with Mike?" The look on her face was priceless: shock, disbelief, and then that all-too-familiar defensive posture. She started with the excuses, spinning tales of how he was just helping her get through a tough time and how platonic their relationship was. But I could see the lie in her eyes. It was all there: the guilt, the denial, the defensiveness. Her response was a mix of anger and sorrow, as if she were the victim here. She insisted I was overreacting, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. I could feel my blood boiling. The woman I loved was lying right in front of me, and I had clear evidence she was cheating. I was hurt, furious, and confused all at once. How could she do this? That night marked the turning point in our lives. I remember sitting on the edge of our bed, looking at her with tears in my eyes, thinking about all the years we spent together, all the moments we shared, and how they had just been reduced to lies. I realized that I needed to make a choice about what to do next. I could either stay and try to salvage the wreckage, or take a step back and rethink my entire life. As the night wore on, I felt a resolve building inside me. I would not let her betrayal define me. I needed to take control of my life and my happiness. That's when I decided I would become my own success story. If I couldn't trust her love, I could trust myself to rise above this. I would focus on becoming a better version of me, not just for her, but for myself. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. But how would I execute this plan? What would come next? I had a lot to figure out, but I was ready to take that first step. After that fateful confrontation, things between Lisa and me were strained, to say the least. The tension in our house was palpable, like a thick fog hanging in the air. I could feel the weight of her lies pressing down on me, and every time I looked at her, all I could see was betrayal. It was clear that we were living in two different realities now. She was in her world of deceit, and I was determined to forge a path for myself. The days turned into weeks, and while Lisa and I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, it felt like we were merely going through the motions. I started focusing on my job more, pouring my energy into projects and meetings, hoping to distract myself from the chaos at home. But the truth was, I felt hollow inside. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but I was a man on a mission now. I needed to emerge stronger. I took the time to analyze my life. I began to reflect on what I truly wanted. The idea of self-improvement had always been important to me, but now it became a necessity. I started hitting the gym regularly, not just to improve my physical appearance, but also to clear my mind. I signed up for courses at the community college to learn new skills, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. The more I focused on myself, the more empowered I felt, and it was intoxicating. Meanwhile, Lisa was still caught up in her web of lies. She never stopped seeing Mike, and I quickly realized that she was trying to play both sides to maintain her affair and keep our marriage afloat. I'd hear her on the phone, laughing and whispering sweet nothings at all hours. It made my blood boil, but I was determined to rise above her games. With every laugh that echoed through the house, I resolved to turn my pain into progress. I started documenting my journey as a way to keep myself accountable. I wrote about my workouts, my classes, and my growing sense of independence. I even created a blog, sharing my experiences and thoughts on self-discovery and resilience. It was cathartic, and surprisingly, people started to respond. They related to my story, and it felt good to connect with others who had experienced betrayal in their own lives. For the first time in ages, I felt like I was carving out my own identity, separate from Lisa. But I wasn't completely ready to let go of her yet. There were still moments when I would feel the ache of loss, the memories of the life we once had flooding my mind. I missed the intimacy we used to share, the laughter, the cuddles on the couch, the late-night talks. It was like mourning the death of a relationship, and I needed to acknowledge that. Still, I was resolute. I would not allow her dishonesty to drag me down. After several weeks of this new routine, I received a message from one of my college instructors, inviting me to a networking event. At first, I hesitated. The thought of stepping into a room full of strangers made me anxious, but I realized that it was the perfect opportunity to expand my horizons and meet new people. Plus, it gave me a chance to step out of my shell and embrace the new me. The night of the event, I put on my best shirt and took a deep breath. As I entered the venue, I felt a rush of adrenaline. It was crowded and the energy was buzzing. I found myself gravitating toward a group of people discussing marketing strategies, and I jumped into the conversation. The more I engaged with them, the more confidence surged through me. For the first time in a while, I felt a sense of belonging. As I mingled with others, I exchanged business cards, laughed, and even shared a few jokes. I realized how much I had missed connecting with others outside of my home life. This was what I wanted: friends, opportunities, and connections that would help me grow. I could feel the weight of my situation with Lisa slowly lifting, and I was starting to envision a future without her. But the world has a funny way of bringing things full circle. Just as I was stepping into this new chapter, I ran into Mike at the event. He was charming as ever, wearing that disarming smile that had caught Lisa's attention in the first place. My instincts kicked in, and I felt my stomach churn. I couldn't let him ruin my night. He walked over, clearly recognizing me. "Jake, good to see you, man. How's everything going?" His casual tone felt like a slap in the face, and I forced myself to respond politely, even though my blood boiled beneath the surface. I knew I had to maintain my composure. I was not about to let him see how much he affected me. "Everything's fine, Mike," I said, my voice steady, "just focusing on some new projects." He nodded, still smiling, and I could see the arrogance in his eyes. They had been more than just coach and client. He was now someone who had invaded my life in the most painful way. As the conversation dragged on, I realized I had the upper hand. I was no longer the passive, hurt husband. I was finding my strength, my confidence, and I was not going to let him or Lisa define my worth. I ended the conversation on my terms, walking away with my head held high. In that moment, I felt liberated. I returned home that night with a sense of purpose. I was no longer just a man hurt by betrayal. I was a man on a journey to reclaim his life. I had no idea what the future held, but I was ready to embrace it, with or without Lisa. My heart was still heavy, but my resolve was stronger than ever. This was only the beginning of my transformation into my own success story. Little did I know that my journey was just warming up, and soon I would have to confront Lisa again. This time, not just as her husband, but as someone who had found his own voice and strength. The following weeks were a whirlwind of self-discovery and healing for me. I kept pushing myself harder, both in the gym and in my professional life. I was building a new life brick by brick, and I could feel myself transforming into someone I barely recognized, a person who valued himself enough to deserve better. But as I was finding my footing, Lisa was still tethered to her own web of lies and deceit. One evening, as I was getting ready to go out to meet some friends, Lisa walked into the living room, looking particularly well put together. She had dressed up for the occasion, and a wave of insecurity washed over me. I hadn't seen her make this effort in a long time. It was a stark reminder of the woman I once loved and the life we used to share. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of doubt about my newfound strength. Was I ready to confront her again? "Going out?" she asked, a hint of bitterness creeping into her voice. "Yeah, just meeting some people from school," I replied, forcing a casual tone. "Must be nice," she said, crossing her arms. "I've been busy too, you know." Her words hung in the air, charged with unspoken resentment. I didn't want to engage in a petty argument. Instead, I grinned. "You know what? I really am enjoying it. Feels good to be out there again." The truth was, I was enjoying my life without her. I didn't need her approval or validation anymore. I stepped out, leaving her fuming in the living room, and it felt good. But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation was coming. I had been preparing myself for it, crafting the words I would say when the time came. I was ready for a fight, ready to finally lay everything out on the table. That weekend, as I returned home after another successful evening out, I found Lisa waiting for me, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady. I knew this was the moment I had been anticipating. My heart raced, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Okay," I replied. We sat down in the living room, and I could feel the tension radiating between us. I decided to let her speak first, hoping she would finally drop the act and admit to her infidelity. "I know things haven't been great," she started, avoiding my gaze, "but I think we can still work on this." "Work on what?" I interrupted. "You mean the marriage you've been cheating on?" Her eyes widened, and I could see the panic setting in. For a second, I almost felt pity for her, but I quickly reminded myself of the pain she had caused. "Jake, it's not like that, Mike. He's been helping me. I got lost for a little while," she stammered, her voice breaking. "Lost? Really? You thought it was okay to go sleep with him?" I shot back, my anger bubbling over. "You made a choice, Lisa. You chose to betray me, to lie to my face while I was here trying to be a supportive husband. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was confused and just wanted to feel something again." "Feel something? You didn't just feel something. You went to bed with him. You broke my trust, and now you want to walk back in here and pretend everything is fine." Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. "I know I messed up. I'm sorry. I thought we were drifting apart and he was just there. It meant nothing." The anger surged through me again, but I had to stay composed. "It obviously meant something if you're still seeing him. I'm done with Mike. I don't want him anymore." She cried out, desperation flooding her voice. "I want to fix this. I want you back." "Fix this?" I echoed incredulously. "You think you can just undo the damage? You think I'm going to forget that you've been lying to me? I've spent the last few weeks finding myself, and yet you're still stuck in your patterns." Her sobs intensified. "I know I've hurt you, but I love you. Can't we just try again?" I felt the weight of her words, the appeal of a familiar love, but I couldn't let that cloud my judgment. Love isn't enough anymore, Lisa. You've shown me who you are, and it's not someone I can trust. The silence hung heavily in the air as she looked at me, her expression a mixture of regret and anger. I could see the fury brewing beneath her tears, the realization that her charming life had cracked under the weight of her betrayal. "Are you really going to throw everything away over this?" she asked, desperation dripping from her voice. "We've built a life together." "Yes, and you've shattered it," I replied, my voice steady. "I refuse to be the fool you think I am. I've learned to be my own priority, and I'm not going to go back to being the man who just accepts your lies." At that moment, I felt a wave of clarity wash over me. I had been fighting for my own happiness, and I was not about to let her pull me back into a life that had caused me so much pain. I stood up, ready to walk away from the conversation. "I think it's best if we take some time apart," I said, my voice firm. "I need to figure out what I want, and I don't think that involves you right now." As I turned to leave, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. I was finally standing up for myself, reclaiming my power. But as I closed the door behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling of loss. The life we had built together was crumbling, and while I felt justified in my decision, it still hurt. I spent the night out, seeking solace in the company of friends, and the laughter helped numb the pain. I knew this was just the beginning of a long journey toward healing, but I was ready to embrace it. I had taken a pivotal step in reclaiming my life, and I wasn't turning back. Tomorrow would be a new day. I would wake up to a new chapter, one where I could write my own story without the weight of betrayal dragging me down. I was determined to succeed, to be my own success story, no matter what it took, and I was ready for whatever came next. The days that followed my confrontation with Lisa were both liberating and tumultuous. I had taken the first big step toward reclaiming my life, but the emotional fallout was intense. I felt like I had ripped off a bandage, exposing a wound I had thought was only superficial. It was raw and painful, but I knew it was the beginning of a healing process I desperately needed. The first week of separation was disorienting. I spent my days working and my evenings tying up loose ends at home, packing Lisa's things, redistributing shared items, and trying to figure out what my new life would look like without her. I had no idea how long this separation would last or if reconciliation was even a possibility. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. For the first time in a long while, I had the space to think freely. I began to journal my thoughts, delving deep into my feelings about the relationship and the betrayal. Writing helped me process the whirlwind of emotions I was experiencing: anger, sadness, regret, and most importantly, a burgeoning sense of self-worth. I was learning to articulate what I wanted for my future and the kind of partner I deserved. I started envisioning a life where I was happy alone, without relying on anyone else to validate me. I also turned to my friends for support. We spent time together, playing video games, hitting the gym, and enjoying the kind of camaraderie that reminded me life could still be fulfilling, even amid personal chaos. One evening, while grabbing drinks with my college buddies, I shared my story. They listened intently, and I could see the concern in their eyes. They rallied around me, offering words of encouragement and support that propelled me further down the path of self-discovery. But as much as I tried to distract myself, Lisa was still lurking in the back of my mind. I could tell she was struggling with the separation. I would receive occasional texts from her, oscillating between anger and pleading, but I resisted the urge to engage. I knew that responding would only open the door to more emotional turmoil, something I desperately wanted to avoid. Then, about 2 weeks after our confrontation, I received a call from Lisa. I was surprised to see her name pop up on my phone. I hesitated but eventually picked up. "Jake," she said, her voice trembling. "Can we talk? I really need to see you." I took a deep breath, weighing my options. Part of me didn't want to see her. I had spent weeks building my new life, and I wasn't sure I wanted to risk that stability. But another part of me was curious. What could she possibly want to say now? "All right," I replied cautiously. "Let's meet at the coffee shop down the street." When I arrived, I spotted her sitting at a corner table, her hands nervously fidgeting with a napkin. She looked different, vulnerable and worn, but still striking. As I approached, I noted the bags under her eyes. The fight in her had faded, replaced by a look of genuine remorse. "Hey," I said, taking a seat opposite her. "What's going on?" "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice shaky. "I've had some time to think, and I realize I've made a huge mistake. I hurt you, and I'm truly sorry." I studied her for a moment, searching for sincerity in her eyes. "You know, you've said that before, but actions speak louder than words, Lisa. You can't just apologize and expect everything to be okay." "I know," she admitted, her gaze dropping to the table. "I was lost. I thought I could find myself through Mike, but I see now how wrong I was. I want to make this right. I want to go to therapy, work through our issues, whatever it takes." Her words hung in the air, and I felt a mix of anger and pity. Part of me wanted to believe her, to think that we could fix what was broken, but another part, a much louder part, was screaming at me to remember the pain she had caused. "I also want to let you know that I've ended things with Mike," she continued, looking up at me with pleading eyes. "I realized he wasn't what I needed. It was never about him. It was about me avoiding our problems." I took a sip of my coffee, trying to gather my thoughts. "Look, Lisa, I appreciate you saying that, but the truth is, trusting you again is going to take time. You shattered my reality, and it's not something that can be fixed overnight." "I understand," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I want to show you that I can be better. I'm willing to put in the work to rebuild what we lost." I felt my walls beginning to waver. The emotional connection we once had was still there, lurking beneath the surface. But I also knew that love alone wasn't enough to heal this wound. I needed to be realistic about what that would entail. "Here's the thing," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm not ready to jump back into anything. I need time to figure out what I want. This separation has been enlightening for me. I've found my own strength in being alone, and I don't want to lose that." Lisa nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I can respect that. I just hope you can find it in your heart to let me show you I can change." As we talked, I felt a strange sense of closure slowly creeping in. We spoke about our past, the good times and the mistakes made. For the first time, I felt like we were on equal ground, acknowledging our failures without the usual blame game. It was refreshing, and I could tell that she was genuinely trying to own her mistakes. When we parted ways, I felt lighter, yet still unsure of what the future held. I had no illusions that one conversation would resolve everything, but it felt like a small step toward potential healing. I knew I still had a long road ahead, and I wasn't ready to commit to anything just yet. Returned home, reflecting on our talk, I felt both empowered and conflicted. I had started to carve out a new life for myself, and while I wasn't entirely sure if Lisa would fit into that future, I was open to the possibility of change. In the days that followed, I continued attending my classes, working on my fitness, and hanging out with friends. I even started going on casual dates, something I hadn't considered before. My confidence was growing, and I was learning to love myself again in ways I had almost forgotten. But in the back of my mind, Lisa's words lingered. I knew she was trying to change, but change takes time, and I needed to prioritize my journey first. I was still cautious, still taking things one day at a time. With every passing moment, I was becoming more aware of the importance of self-love and self-respect. I recognized that I was the architect of my happiness, and I was ready to build something new, even if it meant doing it without Lisa by my side. It was time to embrace my newfound strength and see where it would take me next. After my conversation with Lisa, I found myself in a unique limbo. I was no longer the blindsided husband. I was a man rediscovering himself, yet I still had to navigate the muddy waters of my past relationship. Lisa's attempts to reconnect were earnest, but I held firm to my boundaries. I needed to see real change, not just empty apologies. As the weeks rolled on, I focused on the things that brought me joy and fulfillment. My blog continued to gain traction, and I began to explore topics surrounding personal growth and resilience. I even started getting comments from readers who found solace in my journey. It felt good to know that my experiences could resonate with others. Writing became my therapy, a way to process my feelings while also helping those who might be struggling with similar situations. I also began dating casually. It was an exhilarating experience, stepping out into the world and meeting new people. One evening, I went out with a woman named Sarah I met through mutual friends. We clicked immediately, sharing stories and laughter over drinks at a local bar. She was sharp, funny, and had this infectious energy that reminded me of the excitement I used to feel before Lisa's betrayal. With each passing date, I was reminded that there was a world of possibilities outside of my past life. But even as I explored new connections, Lisa continued reaching out. We would have occasional conversations, and I was surprised by how much I appreciated her honesty in those moments. She had started therapy and seemed genuinely committed to changing herself. I found myself softening toward her, but I remained cautious. Trust is not something that's easily rebuilt. One evening, while I was at home winding down after a long day, I received a call from Lisa. I hesitated but picked up, curious to see where she was at. "Jake, I'd like to invite you to dinner, just you and me. I want to make this right," she said, her voice serious but sincere. I felt a mix of apprehension and intrigue. "Dinner, just us?" "Yes. I want to show you that I'm serious about working on our relationship," she replied. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about what went wrong and how I can do better. I hope you'll give me a chance to explain." I knew I was taking a risk by agreeing, but curiosity got the better of me. "All right, let's do it." The night of our dinner, I arrived at the restaurant feeling a cocktail of emotions. Lisa was already there, looking beautiful and slightly nervous. As I sat down, she smiled, but I could sense the tension in the air. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice tentative. "Of course," I replied, matching her energy. "So, what's on your mind?" She took a deep breath, clearly gathering her thoughts. "I've been doing a lot of reflecting since we last spoke. I realized that I was running away from our problems instead of facing them. I thought I could find happiness in someone else, but it only made everything worse. I've learned that I need to take responsibility for my actions." I nodded, listening intently. "That's a good start. But how do I know this isn't just another phase?" "I know it takes time to rebuild trust, and I'm willing to put in the work. I've started therapy and am committed to understanding myself better. I want to learn about what drove me to seek validation outside of our marriage. I want to be better for you, for us," she said earnestly. As she spoke, I could see the sincerity in her eyes. There was a softness to her demeanor that hadn't been there in the past, but I still had my reservations, and I needed to vocalize them. "Lisa, I appreciate you taking responsibility, but I also need you to understand that I'm not the same person I was before everything happened. I've been working on myself, and I need to know that you're not just saying what you think I want to hear," I said, my tone firm but respectful. "I understand," she replied, her voice steady. "I don't expect you to just forgive me. I have to earn your trust back, and I'm prepared to do whatever it takes." The conversation flowed, and as we delved deeper into the issues that had plagued our marriage, I felt a strange sense of relief. We talked about our needs, our fears, and the love we had shared. It was refreshing to finally have an open, honest dialogue without defensiveness or blame. By the end of the evening, I felt a mix of hope and caution. I was ready to jump back into a relationship, but Lisa had shown me a side of her that I hadn't seen in a long time. I knew I had to take my time. As we walked out of the restaurant, Lisa looked at me with a hopeful expression. "Can we keep talking? Maybe work on rebuilding what we had?" I paused, taking a moment to consider my answer. "Let's take it slow. I want to see how you continue to change and grow. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight." She nodded, a look of understanding on her face. "I'm okay with that. I'm just glad we're communicating again." The air felt lighter between us as we said our goodbyes, and for the first time in a long while I felt a flicker of possibility. I was still cautious, but I also realized that hope could coexist with boundaries. In the days that followed, I continued my routine of focusing on myself while keeping the lines of communication open with Lisa. We exchanged texts, sharing thoughts and updates about our progress. I was still rebuilding my life, but now I was doing it with the awareness that healing and growth could happen on both sides. I began to see that while my journey was personal, The possibility of a renewed relationship with Lisa could be part of that journey, albeit at a different pace. I was beginning to embrace the idea that success comes in many forms, and sometimes it's about learning how to navigate relationships with renewed trust and understanding. I was ready to face whatever came next, whether it was forging a new path alone or rediscovering a partnership that had once meant the world to me. The future was uncertain, but I was prepared to embrace it, one step at a time. As time went on, Lisa and I began to establish a new rhythm of communication. It was still delicate, like walking on a tightrope, but I found myself more willing to engage with her. She was genuinely working on her issues, and I could see the effort she was putting into therapy. I wanted to believe in the possibility of a second chance, but my heart was still guarded. We started meeting regularly, catching up over coffee or dinner. Each conversation was a mixture of vulnerability and hope, as we both shared our thoughts and feelings. Lisa was determined to prove that she had changed, but I was equally determined to make sure I was not swept back into the old patterns that had caused our downfall. One afternoon, we met at a park, sitting on a bench under the shade of a sprawling oak tree. The weather was perfect, and for a brief moment, it felt like we were simply two friends reconnecting rather than two people entangled in a complicated past. "Jake," she began, her voice soft, "I want you to know how much I appreciate you giving me this chance. I know I have a long way to go, but I'm committed to doing the work." "I can see that, Lisa," I replied, trying to maintain the balance of cautious optimism. "But you need to understand that rebuilding trust takes time. I'm still processing everything." "I get that," she said, looking down at her hands. "I'm not here to rush you or make you feel uncomfortable. I just want to be honest about how I feel." I nodded, feeling the sincerity in her words. It was refreshing to hear her take accountability without deflecting or making excuses. "It's just, I've been through so much these past few months. I'm not the same guy I was before, and I'm still figuring out what I want." "I understand," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "I can see that you've changed. You seem more confident, more in tune with what you want out of life. I admire that." Her acknowledgement felt good, and it made me realize how far I had come. I had transformed from a hurt man into someone who was actively figuring out his own path. And while the thought of rekindling our relationship was daunting, it also felt like an opportunity to build something new. As our conversations continued, I found myself starting to let my guard down a bit. I began to recall the moments that had drawn us together in the first place, the laughter, the shared dreams, the way we used to support one another through tough times. I allowed myself to remember the love we had, albeit with an understanding that it needed to evolve. One evening, as we strolled along the riverfront, Lisa reached for my hand. I hesitated at first, but then I intertwined my fingers with hers. It felt surprisingly natural, and I realized how much I had missed that warmth. "Jake, I know I don't deserve it, but I hope you can let me back into your life," she said, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "I want to rebuild our relationship, but I also want to be a better version of myself. I want to be a partner you can rely on." The sincerity in her words pierced through my defenses. I could see the woman I fell in love with beneath the layers of hurt and betrayal. "I'm open to it, Lisa," I said cautiously, "but it's going to take time and I need to see consistent change." "I can do that," she promised, her eyes brightening with hope. "I want to be the person who makes you proud." As the weeks passed, we integrated more into each other's lives again. I introduced her to my friends who welcomed her back with a mix of guarded optimism and support. We attended events together, and while it felt different, it also felt right. Lisa was becoming more involved in my world, and I was beginning to let her back in. I started inviting her to my family gatherings, and it was often bittersweet. Watching her interact with my loved ones reminded me of the strong bond we once shared, but I also noticed how hard it was for my family to fully embrace her again. They were protective of me, and I appreciated their concern. One particular evening, after a family dinner, my mom pulled me aside. "Jake, I can see that you're trying to reconcile with Lisa, and I want you to be happy. But I just want to make sure you're being careful. You've been through a lot." "I know, Mom," I replied, feeling the weight of her words. "I'm taking it slow. I'm not rushing into anything. I'm learning to trust myself again." She smiled, a mixture of relief and concern on her face. "Just promise me you'll keep an open line of communication with us. We're here for you no matter what." As I walked back to the living room, I felt grateful for my family's support. It reassured me that I was not alone in this journey, no matter how difficult it became. The turning point came during our third month of reconnecting. Lisa and I attended a workshop on communication and trust, and it was eye-opening for both of us. The exercises forced us to confront our past and articulate our needs going forward. It was challenging yet cathartic. By the end of the workshop, I felt a shift in our dynamic. I was no longer just reacting to Lisa's words. I was actively participating in our future. We were both learning how to communicate better and understand one another's perspectives. It was a step toward healing, and I could feel the old weight lifting from my shoulders. One night, as we sat on my couch talking about our hopes for the future, I felt a sense of peace settle over us. "You know, I'm starting to believe we could actually build something new together," I said, looking into her eyes. "Me too," she replied softly, "and I'm committed to making it work this time." We spent the rest of the evening talking and laughing, and for the first time since the betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. It was a small spark, but it was there, a flicker of possibility that maybe we could redefine our relationship. As I lay in bed that night, I reflected on how far I had come. I had transformed from the hurt husband into a man who had learned to prioritize his own well-being. I was still cautious, but I was also open to the idea of love again. In this journey of self-discovery, I had learned that healing takes time, and rebuilding trust is a gradual process. I had also learned that sometimes, the path to success isn't just about personal achievements. It's about navigating relationships with honesty, empathy, and understanding. Whether I ended up with Lisa or continued to build my life solo, I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer the man who would settle for less than I deserved. I was ready for whatever came next, embracing the unknown with open arms and a hopeful heart. The journey was far from over, but it was mine to shape, and I was determined to make it a success story worth telling.